Welcome everyone to the Thrive Show. I am so excited today to be with you, and we have a very, very special guest, Martin Rutte. Martin Rutte is the founder of Project Heaven on Earth, and what an extraordinary man he is. I'd love to just take a few minutes and read his biography, which is very impressive. He's an international speaker, management consultant, president of Livelihood. Martin has worked with organizations such as the World Bank, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Southern California Edison, Virgin Records, Esso, Petroleum, and London Life Insurance, helping them expand their outlook and position themselves for the future. Martin's newest book is called Project Heaven on Earth, the 3 simple questions that will help you change the world easily. He helps people discover what heaven on earth is for them and what simple, easy, concrete action steps they can take in the next 24 hours to begin making that real for themselves. He has presented workshops and given talks all around the world on the topic heaven on earth in the US, Canada, England, Germany, Brazil, Mexico, Spain, Sweden, and Costa Rica, just to name a few. Martin, welcome.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
I'm laughing as you went through each of the countries. Oh, yeah.
And there's more coming, I know. I'd love to get started with what had you create this ambitious, audacious, and life-fulfilling project and mission?
First of all, good morning or good afternoon or wherever you are. Good time of day to you. I've been always interested, Jennifer, in the notion of vision. Mm-hmm. What does your heart and soul really long for, and how do we make that real? As you said, I have an extensive background in consulting with major clients in the US and around the world, and focusing on vision, and I've spoken at the Harvard Business School 4 times on vision. And I began looking at the notion of vision in the late 80s in Toronto, where we were living. And people said, you're nuts. In those days, believe it or not, the word vision, I remember somebody said, what are you, smoking dope or something? You can't use that word, which was astounding to me, but that was the true sentiment at that time. So it forced me to look inside and say, no, this is what I want to do. So I did a whole bunch of work on vision. That led into work on spirituality and work. I helped introduce the conversation of spirituality at work into businesses. I helped launch a Center for Spirituality in the Workplace at a business school in Canada. I was the chair of the board. And one day I was going to do a talk, a keynote address at a conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico on spirituality and work. And I was sitting in the green room getting ready to go on, and I was thinking, if every business in the world is spiritual, is that what you want? And I said, no, not really. If every business in the world is spiritual, whatever spiritual means, let's put that aside for a moment, then we could transform business. And because business is the temporal power in the world, we could transform the world. And then this thought popped into my mind, oh, you mean heaven on earth? And I went, wow, you can't say that. And I thought, wait a minute, why can't you say that? I can talk to you about hell on earth, can't I? That's a permissible conversation. Why can't I talk to you about heaven on earth? Why can't I talk to you about what your heart desires for yourself, your relationships, your work, your nation, and our world? And so that just, it intrigued me. And I knew at that moment that would be the next phase of my life, that I would devote myself to understanding what heaven on earth was, and more importantly, to evoke it from people so they began to engage with heaven on earth on their own terms, which we'll go into more, but that's how I got to heaven on earth.
That's fantastic. And you founded the project 20 years ago, is that correct?
Actually longer, I think 30 years ago.
30 years ago. I'm a little bit behind in my statistics then.
That's all right.
30 years. So what have you noticed? And since you founded this amazing project and you've literally, been traveling around the world to inspire and encourage people to step into creating heaven on earth now, not someday, but now, what have you noticed evolve in the last 30 years?
Well, let me just start with what happened at the beginning when the thought, you mean heaven on earth, came into my mind. I thought I wanted to do an inquiry. I wanted to go on this discovery journey to discover what am I even talking about. So I started going around asking people, what's heaven on earth? What's heaven on earth? What's heaven on earth? Over and over and over. And I began to see, excuse me, I began to see, some coughing. I began to see patterns. And I began to see that the question, what is heaven on earth for you, wasn't really the essence of it, that there were three questions. And so, and we didn't talk about this before, but I'd love to ask you the three questions and have your listeners, your viewers, stop the video when I ask each question and answer it for themselves, because in doing that, you will discover at a much deeper sense what I'm talking about. So can I do that with you?
Absolutely.
All right, so question one. Recall a time when you discovered heaven on earth, when you experienced heaven on earth. Recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth. What was going on?
So for me, that time happened in the early days of COVID, actually, when the world came to a screeching halt and we were in the global pandemic. And I remember distinctly going outside. It was a beautiful day, and I was very aware of the birds. Now, listen, I spend some time in nature on a regular basis, but this particular day, I was very aware that there were more birds, and the sound coming from the birds, just like it was like they were happy and as if they were singing hallelujah. And I remember like feeling as if the rhythm of the world had slowed down. And I remember saying to myself silently, thank God. Because from, at that point, that was just a few years ago, and I was in my 40s. And up until that point, my life has been this very fast paced, like trying to, get to the next thing or, the next success. And that's how I viewed success, was like, always in search of more. But something transcended when the pandemic happened. And when things slowed down, what I started to observe was people started to stay home. They started to commune. They started to connect. They started to connect with themselves. They started to connect with nature. They started to connect with their loved ones. And that reminded me of when I was a little girl. When I was a little girl, it was mandatory that we all sat down and had dinner together. There were no phones, nothing to distract us. We were in conversation with each other. We were present with each other. And so for me, all of these, and I also remember, the colors outside looked more vibrant and more radiant. The air felt cleaner. And I was like, wow, what if we could create this sustainably around the world and also be able to get to a place where everyone is thriving? Now, here's the thing, Martin, and I know you're going to ask me the next question. I lived that experience, which felt like pure bliss to me, for weeks. But then I started to notice more people were afraid of the virus, afraid of contracting it, and all of their fears. And as somebody who, has struggled with fear most of my life, actually, to be on the other side of this was shocking to me. But I had lived through, a terrorist attack in 2013. I was standing 15 feet from the first of two explosions at the Boston Marathon bombings, where I was utterly terrified. But that journey of rising up from that taught me things, brought me back home to love and appreciate myself in all that is. So now I find myself in this place where I'm on the opposite side of what most people around me are experiencing. And over time, I started to feel guilty that I was feeling this way, because no matter what I said, I couldn't seem to influence people that this were possible, even in the midst of all of the stuff that was happening, all of the chaos. So I started to lose touch with it, frankly. And then I was introduced to you, and that's the magic, because you've reintroduced this back into my life, and I'm forever grateful.
Thank you. Thank you. Very beautiful. Let's continue on with the questions. Then I'm going to come back and talk about the questions and then answer more deeply your question about what have I noticed. So imagine you have a magic wand. This is question 2. Imagine you have a magic wand, and with this wand, simply by waving it, you can have heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth?
Heaven on earth is a world where everyone is thriving, where everyone is in collaboration with one another, where everyone, despite their differences, despite how they look, despite what they may believe in, that they actually recognize that every single person matters, everyone, and that everyone has a unique gift, and they are able to express that with one another and to feel safe to express that and know that that's going to be received. And so for me, it's really where we transcend into survival mode, into thriving mode, and where we can literally live heaven on earth as humanity.
Very clear. Very clear. And then the third question, what simple, easy, concrete step will you take in the next 24 hours to move that forward, to move heaven on earth forward?
Actually, there are two. One is to continue to share your work with people. And secondly is I developed a practice probably 4 years ago. It's a spinoff from the Ho'oponopono prayer. And where when I get triggered, because as human beings, we do get triggered, is rather than, express those, negative emotions, if you will, to actually say the Ho'oponopono prayer. And then I add my own prayer to it, which is basically thanking the person for gifting me to seeing where I am out of balance. That's what all triggers are.
Yeah.
Triggers are just a reflection back to us of where we're out of balance and where we're not loving ourselves, unconditionally. And so that is something I do on a regular basis, is just extend love and compassion to one another, including myself.
Very beautiful. So let's go let's go through the questions. Question 1, recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth. What was going on? You talked very beautifully about going outside, listening to the birds, seeing how everything was so vibrant. Everything was alive. I'm going to just hold on one second. I got something. I'm getting over.
For the listeners, actually, Martin's he's in the stages of recovering from COVID himself. So let's give him some grace.
I didn't want to go into that, but yes, I am. And I'm fine. So that was question 1. Now, what's interesting is you answered the question. Recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth, what was going on. What you didn't do, and what nobody does, is say, tell me what you mean by heaven on earth. Or in those rare occasions when they do, I refuse to answer. I didn't define heaven on earth, and yet you knew exactly what I was talking about. How? It's because, excuse me again. It's because you have within you what I call the already knowing about heaven on earth. And that's how you're able to answer that question. The second question, here's a magic wand, and with it you can have heaven on earth. The purpose of the magic wand is to remove the necessity of having to know how you're going to do it. And if you don't have to know how, then you can focus purely and powerfully on the what. And your what? People are thriving, people are collaborating, every person matters, every person is sharing, giving their gifts. We're moving, we have moved as humanity from surviving, and we are now thriving. So you do know what heaven on earth is. And then the third question, what are you going to do about it? Share my work, share heaven on earth, and do the Ho'oponopono prayer plus your own addition to it. When I ask those 3 questions over and over and over again, you notice the difference between what's heaven on earth for you, which is, I think, too big a question for people to answer, versus the 3 questions that I've developed. When you ask and have the person answer the 3 questions that I've said here, they get right into it. They have had an experience, they know what heaven on earth is, and they know what they're going to do about it. So what have I noticed over the 30 years? I've noticed at first that a lot of people's eyes glazed over when I brought up the topic of heaven on earth. What are you talking about? That's crazy. We've never had it. It can't be done. Goodbye. Until today, because of all the surface turmoil on the planet, the environment, North Korea, the Russian attack on the Ukraine, the economy, the political situation, There's a lot of surface turmoil going on that people are no longer willing to be the story of what it means to be a human and what it means to be humanity. If so, let us replace it with something that serves us as individuals and us collectively. And so I'm suggesting that our new story is we are co-experiencing and co-creating heaven on earth. And I'm surprised, this is what I've very clearly noticed. It's moved from a complete impossibility. I did a lecture to a social work class yesterday in Massachusetts. And it moves from impossibility to, that could be, to, oh my God, to, we're actually doing this, to, I can actually do this. That's the key. Once people get that that you know what heaven on earth is, and that you can do something about making it real, they're in. And you notice I'm not imposing. I'm not saying this is heaven on earth, I know what it is and you don't, and I'm going to impose it on you. No, rather I'm evoking it from you. I'm saying I know that you know, and these 3 questions are designed to evoke it, and they do.
Fantastic. So I want to ask you the questions.
Go ahead.
Tell me a time when you experienced heaven on earth.
This morning, my wife had gone out to sleep on the couch because she likes to read at night sometimes, and the light disturbs me. So she went out, and I was sleeping. I got up, and she didn't know I was up, and I was sitting in the chair, and I looked out the bedroom door, and she was, tiptoeing around, going into the kitchen, and just not wanting to make noise and wake me up. And it was so beautiful and so sweet. And I could just feel her love for me. I can't make a noise because I might wake him up. And it was so beautiful. Then she looked, and then she saw me, and then she just came toward me. So that was just lovely. It was heaven for me, and her, and us. And we just celebrated the 24th of October. We just celebrated 50 years. I know.
Happy belated anniversary. That's amazing.
Thank
you.
And
how do you contribute? How do you attribute, 50 years of bliss?
Not 50 years of bliss.
Yeah, right. So how do you keep
Don't forget the fighting. That the basis is a commitment, is a trust, there's nothing that cannot be spoken about, especially the negative. Very important that the negative be spoken about. That I can make her laugh and still make her laugh. That she supports me in my work. That we're each other's best buddies. We like to just hang out with each other. That when we fight, we developed this thing years ago that we have this fight about what's any fight about? I'm right, you're wrong. And same for her. And we would say, fight. And that was the key word, code word, just we'd split. She would go into one room, I go to another. And then 5 minutes later we'd come back, and of course it's gone. Once you realize it's all about I'm right, you're wrong. Or, triggered, as you said. What else? It's fun. It's fun being with her. And as a friend of mine said the other day, it's half a century. And I went, it's not half a century, it's only 50 years. What's so interesting is I say 50 years to you and I don't believe it. It's true though.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Coming back to the questions, we're on question 2. So if I had a magic wand, and I happen to have Marcy Shimoff's Year of Miracles pen in front of me. So
my beloved Marcy.
Yes. So, what if you had a magic wand?
And there was the 3 women, right? Marcy, Lisa Garr, and
Dr. Stu Morter.
Stu Morter. Ugh. And that's about all of them. If I have a magic wand with it, I can create heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth? That humanity gets, that humanity has the agency to co-experience and co-create this new story called heaven on earth, and that we are doing that visibly, experientially. The world gets, oh, wait a minute, something new really is going on here. That's heaven on earth for me. And I know it's moving in that direction. We'll talk about some examples of what people are doing, but I study the numbers every year. The numbers, if you go on Google and put in quotes, heaven on earth, and then put the last 3 years and watch how the numbers have exploded. It's a measurement for me of what's going on under the surface in culture. So that's the second question. And then the third, what's simple, easy? Well, I'm doing two things today. I'm doing this interview with you, and then in a couple of hours, after you, I'm doing an interview with a guy from Toronto I haven't spoken to in 30, 40 years. So we'll talk about heaven on earth, I'm sure. And then I'm doing a lecture, an hour and a half lecture to a group called the Mulberry Hill Group, with a friend of mine, Raymond Aaron, runs every month or two, and which we talk about heaven on. Well, I'm the only speaker he brings into the course, and we speak about heaven on earth.
That's fantastic. I actually want to speak to the numbers for a minute. So you said in the last 3 years, you're seeing this uptick, this, in project, in heaven on earth. And I want to speak to that because, a lot of what I now speak about is about energy, right? And so there are these things coming to the surface. And I do believe it is actually our collective, we're starting to dissolve the density of our humanness, I perceive. And I perceive that we are starting to transcend our traumas and our wounds, because I perceive everyone has experienced them, everyone on the planet in some shape or form. And I feel that there's this undercurrent of we're no longer willing to tolerate war and separation, division, hatred, racism, all of those things that have kept us in surviving mode of some form. And I feel that, but in order for us to shift and transcend, we have to be able to, uplift, uproot, and dissolve these, this surface stuff in order to be able to rise above it, in my experience anyway. But I'd love for you to hear what's happening. What are you noticing, particularly in the last 3 years? Because it's been 2.5 years now since the global pandemic started, and yet and this is another point. Like in the midst of that chaos, and there, serious chaos, there's been like this dismantling. But in this parallel universe, there has been this other uprising, and I do believe we are coming into better days. I truly believe that.
So this is very, very interesting, Jennifer, because you just made a breakthrough for me, which you don't know about, and which I'm going to just tell you. I have been saying for the last several years that the heaven on earth, if you put it in quotes, I said, and look on Google, you'll see the rise, paradise rise, the utopian words. What I've been saying is the surface, it's like the metaphor is an ocean, and the surface is in turmoil in the storm. But when you dive underneath the surface, there's that silence, there's that heaven on earth. What you just said, and you are the first person to say that, and it's an insight for me, is that it is now breaking through onto the surface. No one has ever said that. So thank you for that insight. I'm going to be using that. I've been holding it in place, like the surface turmoil and everything that's arising underneath, and that's it. And now you said, no, Martin, blink, it's broken through. It's a very important new distinction. So thank you. No, that's it. You just said it.
Yeah, that's what I perceive. And I want to, I want to encourage listeners to get your book, which I'm still in the midst of reading. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, no, hold it up, because it just, the background.
Oh, there we go. Project Heaven on Earth. Actually,
no,
Martin,
I'll
you
hold
go
it.
ahead. Okay, perfect.
Now, did we talk about that? What's the title of the book?
Project Heaven on Earth.
There's another title.
The three
No,
simple.
no, no, not that. Within the same title.
Oh, heaven on earth.
No, it's Project Heaven on Earth, but it's also Project Heaven on Earth.
Ah,
The,
okay.
wor- the word project is both a verb and a noun.
I love
So
it.
it's a state of being, project, and a state of doing, project. So being followed by doing, followed by having.
Absolutely. And that's where we can create it. And I do believe we are in the early stages of co-creating heaven on earth. I think that humanity has gotten to the point of we don't want to tolerate what we've been putting up with for centuries, actually. But I want to speak to
Can I
something.
give you some examples then?
Absolutely.
Or I don't know what your next question is, but I think it's important to stick in some examples here of what people are doing so that people who are watching this, you see that this is much more than a good idea. This is actually happening. So let me start with some simple ones and just grow them. A woman in Mexico City smiles at 2 people every day. And that idea came from, in my book, I said, what if you spoke to 2 people today and asked them the 3 heaven on earth questions and asked each of those 2 people to ask 2 other people the next day? So first day there would be just the 1 that you spoke to, then the 2, then the 4, then the 8, and there's 7.8 billion people in the world. How long would it take?
32 days. That was actually going to be like, that actually was going to be what I want to talk about. I'm literally looking at, I have been absolutely mesmerized. So in
that number.
Yeah, well, yes, because here's the thing, right? Here I am reading through the book, studying the book, and tapping back into heaven on earth for me. And I come across this, this page, and it says it would take just 32 days to reach the entire world. And I started studying this map, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it really is that simple. And you talk about it takes just 19 days to reach the first million. And then the exponential factor or the compound effect takes effect, and very quickly after that, 32 days, we can do this. I was so inspired because I'm like, wow. And you talk about, it's really simple. It's what Martin said. One person agrees to talk to 2 people each day. And then that,
No, not even no.
oh,
You
it's just,
speak
it's just that one day.
you speak to 2 people today who have not been spoken to, not asked the 3 questions. That's it. And you
Oh,
ask each of them to speak to 2 people the next day. Your assignment is one day speaking to 2 people who have not been asked the 3 questions. That's it. And if as that expands around the world, 32 days. I remember sitting there with a little calculator thinking, well, how long would it take? And then, wow, 32 day. I don't know how many times I must have redone those calculations. You got to be crazy. That can't be right. It is right.
And I trust me, I was doing I'm like, that can't be right.
I know.
I'm sitting there with the calculator doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, he is right. He is right. So I want to play a game.
Yeah.
I want to play a game. So I love to inspire and encourage and empower people. And I really love to stand behind other people's amazing work. And I think you're an extraordinary human being, Martin. And I absolutely love your courage and your bravery. 30 years ago when you decided to speak the words vision, and then after that, speak heaven on earth, like, wow, that takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery. And then to have the commitment to stay with it. I think that's the key thing that so many people miss, myself included sometimes, is that, things happen along the way, and we sometimes think like, well, maybe this isn't working. And then we shift and divert and lose focus. But we can get recommitted, and we can get back on, to the co-creation and making this possible. So here's the game for the listeners out there. I created this show Thrive Now because so many people on the planet are not thriving now, and I haven't mastered thriving now. So I'm like, well, better, let's start a movement where we are encouraging each other to rise up and to thrive now. And I believe that creating heaven on earth is a piece of that, 100%. Like that's the foundation. So let's play a game. listeners, let's play a game. And the game is this. Today, ask two people who've never heard of Project Heaven on Earth or haven't heard the three questions. Martin, can you recite the questions again, please?
Sure. And this is on my website, projectheavenonearth.com, projectheavenonearth.com. So the three questions: recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth. What was going on? Second question, imagine you have a magic wand and with it you can have heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth for you? And the third question, what simple, easy, concrete, those are very important words, what simple, easy, concrete step or steps will you take in the next 24 hours to create more heaven on earth?
And we're encouraging you for those actions. Ask those three questions to two people, and then ask those two people to ask two more people. And let's see what happens. And I'll bring you back onto the show, Martin, and let's just see, do we see the trend going up even more on Google? I hope that is to be true, because that is what an amazing world we would live in if we all could experience heaven on earth.
I would take the if out.
Great. I love it. Thank you. When we experience
as
we experience heaven on earth.
Have I got time to give you a couple more examples?
I was just going to say yes. Give us a couple more examples. And what words of wisdom would you want to leave listeners with?
So we started with that woman in Mexico. We have a woman who, out of Hawaii now, Colorado, who has put her answer. She is embedded in her emails. Every email she sends out. Imagine you have a magic wand and with it you can have heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth for you? And then she gives what it is for her. In essence, it's to recreate the Garden of Eden. We have a woman in Nova Scotia, Canada. We're doing a webinar on heaven on earth. And she was we were talking about sufferings in the world, and part of heaven on earth being ending a suffering. And she was so mad. I'll tell you a suffering. Violence against women. I've been to the police. I've been to the government. Nothing. What would you do? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know how much money you're worth. Maybe you could donate $5,000. Maybe you could donate a penny. Well, what difference would a penny make? One of the other women on the call said, wait a minute. What if everybody in your county donated a penny a day to help end violence against women? And she went, oh my God. She went back to her group of women, which already existed. And they created a little mason jar with a picture of a woman, half her face beaten up and bruised, half her face bright, alive with the light shining. And the program was called Making Change. And they asked people to donate a penny a day for a year. You couldn't put in $3.65 and say, okay, I've done it. No, because they wanted that consciousness shift. A penny, a penny, a penny, a penny. They handed out those jars in 2 counties. They raised $2,500 in a year. They took that results to the government of Canada, which has a group called Status of Women, who gave them $100,000 for each of the subsequent 3 years. I know. What difference would a penny make? Nothing. Wrong. Now she goes around and people's first question is, what can I do to help? A real estate agent. We're having coffee, and I said, is there a suffering in the world that bothers you? Yes, homelessness. And she went white. You could see the effect of that word on her. I said, okay, so what's heaven on earth for homelessness? Well, obviously, Martin, a home for everyone. No, but you don't understand, Martin. I'm a real estate agent. I work 90 hours, 8 days a week. I'm in a relationship which takes another 10 hours a day. It's and I said, fine, stop. What are you going to do? So she said, she went back to her agency, a little agency with 10 real estate agents. We're going to make a difference in housing in this city. How? I'm asking each of you to agree to have $100 taken off each commission check for every home or commercial building you sell, up to a max of $1,200 a year. We'll put that in a pot, and they started a program called A Home for Everyone. Every year, people submit proposals for a home for everyone, either from individuals or groups. And the judges are the 10 agents and one of their clients. So 20 people every year judge. Last time I spoke to her, they'd raised over $400,000 And amazing. A man from Gabon, Africa, French and English speaking. I was doing a webinar, and when I said heaven on earth, I mean, bang, that's it, that's it, that's it. He started a Facebook group called, get this, Africa, a heaven on earth continent. It blew me away. A woman in Austria. Austria is a heaven on earth nation. I said, Elizabeth, where did you get that idea from? And she was kind of really a little pissed off at me. Well, Martin, it's because it's simple. And she taught me the value of the word simple. I don't know what simple is for you, but you do. So people have taken on nations, continents, a relationship therapist, asking a husband and wife or partners, what's heaven on earth for you for the relationship, and having them speak about that. What's interesting here, Jennifer, is the creativity that emerges and what keeps me so vibrant about this, because I never know what people are going to come up with. I'm a social work class looking at heaven on earth. And the one I want to end up with is, I'm now, well, since COVID began, here in Prince Edward Island, Canada. It's the smallest province. It's an island, actually, and it's where the country was born. So like Philadelphia, United States, it has a real psychological depth in terms of the country. And so we, a group of us, have created this program called Prince Edward Island, Canada's first heaven on earth province. We have a residential treatment center, which I went and lectured once a week for a year and a half on heaven on earth. A home for abused women had a heaven on earth fundraiser. A jewelry store hands out a card with the 3 heaven on earth questions to over 10,000 of her customers. I interviewed each of the 4 political party leaders on this island and made it into a video. And I'll send you the link. And each of them talked about the 3 heaven on earth questions. They answered them, and a 4th question with, using the same magic wand, what's heaven on earth for Prince Edward Island? Each of the 4 political party leaders answering that question. I don't know that it's ever been done before. A cafe has a heaven on earth coffee blend. A tea merchant has a heaven on earth tea blend. I'm stunned by the creativity that emerges. So Prince Edward Island, Canada's first heaven on earth province. It's amazing.
We need to get you to speak to the United Nations.
I would love to do that, because there are other people who have taken on heaven on earth for Denmark, for Croatia, for Mexico, for Hungary, where else? Canada, of course, the United States. So yes, and it really, you see what the thing is here is we've lost our ability of agency. The way you create this new story, the new story of what it means to be a human and what it means to be humanity, i.e. heaven on earth, is by declaration, by saying so. I say, which is what I did at the beginning. I said I wanted heaven on earth. Oh, you can't, it's impossible, we've never had it, that's stupid. People will laugh at you. Okay, thank you, and on I go. And so that's what I'm asking you to do. Simply make a declaration, buy 3 books. 3 books, one for you, one for somebody in your life right now that you know needs this, you know who that is, and one for somebody who's going to come into your life. I had a woman who bought a case of books and put it in the back of her car and just hands them out as appropriate, called The Case for Heaven on Earth.
I love it. And I would like to add a step beyond that is, in addition to go out and buy the book, please go sign up for Martin's 7-day course. He has a free 7-day course on his website, projectheavenonearth.com, and we'll have that in the link below. But it's a 7-day course that literally takes you on an introspection. Obviously, he asks the 3 questions, but it also takes you on this inward journey so that you can start to cultivate that, and you can start to experience it. And more importantly, you can embody it. Like anything else, if the more that we keep this type of conversation at the forefront, we will get there in the 32 days. It's not a one-day thing. It's just a choice every day. What's heaven on earth going to be like for me today?
Lovely. And when you sign up for the free course at projectheavenonearth.com, you will also get a weekly blog. Think of it as like a diamond. So every week you'll get a different facet of this diamond called Heaven on Earth. What that does is it normalizes heaven on earth for you, which is really, really important. It moves from an impossibility to a possibility to a practicality to an embodiment. So the weekly blog is very important. You marinate in heaven on earth.
And then you have a Facebook group too, where you can collaborate and share with other heaven on earth
Heaven makers, heaven makers.
heaven makers. Thank you. All around the world. So
Yep.
Martin, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you today. I look forward to having you back on the show to see, because we are gonna set a challenge. What if we can create heaven on earth in 32 days? And let's play the game. I have goosebumps thinking about what we could literally rise up to.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for the gift today of seeing the breakthrough onto the surface. That's huge. I'll use that.
Thank you. Wishing you a wonderful day and into more heaven on earth experiences for you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.